It's a good afternoon here in Washington, D.C., quiet and sunny. But in Ukraine, it's the second or third almost day of war that Russia started against our country. I would like to thank all of the mass media here for keeping very close attention and helping to inform all the Americans, but also your international audiences, about the recent developments in Ukraine, about all the crimes that Russia is doing now against our country, but also about our fight and about our resistance. As I said during the last 48 now hours, Ukraine has been victim of unprovoked aggression by Russian Federation. The second day was even harder. The attacks have been more brutal, but I'm very pleased to say that they were not successful, definitely not successful as the enemy planned them. So the picture of air raids, tank marches, and rocket shelling of Ukrainian cities are reminiscent of the scenes that the world community has not seen since the World War II. And I'm sure that, like all people in Ukraine, people throughout the globe, in Europe, and definitely here in the United States, are surprised to see, or shocked, I should say, to see these battles in the streets of Kyiv and around Kyiv, but also everywhere in Ukraine. In the last 48 hours, but especially in the last 24 hours, the intense battles continued in Cherkasy, Chernihiv, Mariupol, Kherson, Kharkiv, and other cities of Ukraine. But I want to assure you that the spirit of Ukrainian army and the spirit of Ukrainian people and the spirit of Ukrainian territorial defense remain strong. The commendable fighting spirit has been demonstrated yesterday when 13 soldiers were posted on the Serpent Island on the south of Ukraine. It's a small Ukrainian border patrol outpost in Black Sea. They all refused to surrender to the Russian battleship. They all were killed. And our president just recently said that all these 13 people will be the heroes of Ukraine, and they will be recognized as heroes of Ukraine. But moreover, every Ukrainian, woman and man, who are fighting today for our country, they all are heroes, and we all are defending our home. The enemy is clearly surprised by the resolve of the Ukrainian armed forces and volunteers to protect integrity of our country. We see that they didn't advance the way they planned. We see that the advances, even though are massive, as we describe to you on a regular basis, from south, from east, from north, and massive attack from the air, these advances are not as successful. Although the Russian propaganda machine attempts to convince the world that civilian population was not targeted, I want to tell you directly that this is simply not true. And the last events of the last night here, but day and night in Ukraine, brought more horrific scenes of the Russian war crimes. So, first of all, we have many people right now not living their day-to-day lives, but actually spending the majority of their time in the basements or taking shelter in the metro stations or other safe locations. The Russian Hail multi-rocket launcher system hit residential infrastructure in Ohtyrka town in Sumy Oblast. Several children were heavily wounded. As a result of this Russian shelling in Ohtyrka, the strategic gas pipeline also got under threat, and we already warned all the proper authorities about the potential risk, not only for Ukraine and for that region, but in general for this critical civil infrastructure for the entire country. The enemy also hit the orphanage in Vorzel, Kyiv region, where 50 children were in the orphanage at that moment. And it's only with God's help that these 50 children were not harmed and were not killed during this attack. Several ambulances in Zaporizhia, Kyiv, and Donetsk Oblast were also hit by the enemy. In the attempt to cover up its crimes from their own people, because we all know the truth. And I know the information everywhere in Ukraine, but in Europe, and especially here in the United States, is open for the public, but they would like to cover it from their own people, from Russian people. So today the Russian authorities have decided to partially limit access to Facebook in Russia, yet the international community already documented these crimes to prevent necessary evidence, to present necessary evidence against the Russian government, and our Prosecutor General is collecting all the data and preparing it all for the international tribunals. We are particularly concerned by the situation in the Chernobyl power plant. We were informing the world starting from yesterday that there were fights for this power plant and that Russia completely took over the Chernobyl power plant and the exclusion zone yesterday. We're even more concerned because they took hostages 92 members of the operational personnel of Chernobyl power plant. And contrary to the rules of how the personnel should work in shifts and all the very, very strict and regulations that they are not observed right now, and all responsibility for the Chernobyl power plant is now lies on the Russian forces and Russian army. But we are very concerned that the Chernobyl shelter is under threat of any type of random attack by the Russian Federation. So we are calling for all the international friends and partners to keep a close eye on that. Despite, again, all these activities, and despite the fact that Russian Federation increased the attack on all Ukraine, the Ukrainian armed forces managed not only to keep the situation under control, but significantly stop the Russian army and the advances of the Russian army. In the last 2 days together, we have destroyed 80 tanks, 10 airplanes, 7 helicopters, and 516 armed vehicles of the enemy. And as the result of Mr. Putin's decision to send Russians to kill Ukrainians, 2,800 of Russian soldiers will not be going back to Russia. Again, Ukraine is a peaceful country. We worked really hard to stop and prevent this war. We worked really hard to deter Russia from attacking our country, together with our friends and allies and all the international community. We never attacked anyone. We never attacked Russian Federation. This whole war that Russia started on Ukraine is unjust, unprovoked, and totally baseless. But at the same time, as our president and our chief commander said, since we were attacked and we are defending our home, we will be inflicting as many damages to the enemy as possible in order to defend our Ukraine. I would like also to say today how thankful we are to all of our friends and allies, and especially to the United States, our strategic partner, but I guess I should say our strategic friend. We have received not only significant defense assistance, financial assistance, and a clear support from the leadership. As we are talking to you today, our president just had yet another very productive call with President Biden, and we have discussed, they have discussed on this call the anti-war coalition and how we align all our plans, and we discussed the sanctions and more defense to Ukraine. But we also see that this anti-war coalition, which now includes 73 countries and 9 international organizations, is working hand in hand and very united to not only support and defend Ukraine, but also to support and defend the international law and support and defend the simple principle that any country that decided to be independent, to be sovereign, to be a democracy, to live how we would like to live in our country, has the right to do so without being attacked by a military power, by a nuclear power. So we already see today that the European Union European Union decided to freeze the assets of Mr. Putin and Mr. Lavrov, who are responsible for this decision to start the war. We strongly welcome the decision of the Council of Europe to expel Russia from its membership. As our Minister of Foreign Relations said, all the red lines have been crossed when Russia attacked us. So it's time not only to heavily sanction Russia, but it's also time to exclude them from any organizations where countries that are not peace-loving countries and countries that do not value peace and countries that attack other countries do not have the right to be. We are also thankful to all other friends and allies. And, you know, I don't want to miss someone here, but European Union, Canada, Great Britain, Poland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, all of you, thank you very much for all the support. And of course, we are working, we're grateful for this support, and we're working very closely with all of them in order to receive more support and in order to strengthen the sanctions against Russian Federation. Because as much as we see that the strong sanctions are implemented, they are affecting Russia already, but their behavior didn't stop. So the more strong sanctions should follow, and we work with our partners on that. On the additional measures, as I said, you know, anything that would, we are focusing now on 3 key areas and we're helping all our friends and allies to work on those key 3 areas. One is punishing Russia for its action. Strong sanctions, strong messages from all international organizations, excluding Russia from all international organizations. Also, severing the diplomatic relations with Russia, and we see that some friends and allies are already there. We have to, together, say no to military aggression against one of the European countries in the middle of Europe. The second very important point is defense support to Ukraine. Our brave men and women, all of us, and since yesterday we have the overall mobilization in the country, so all Ukrainians, according to the decision to our president, supported by Ukrainian parliament, all Ukrainians are defending the country at the moment, either in the armed forces or territorial defense or everywhere where the help is needed right now. And we need all the support we can get from all of our friends and allies so we can sustain this defense action. And the third is, of course, the humanitarian assistance and financial assistance that we need in order to take care of our people who were forced to relocate within Ukraine, people whose daily life has been interrupted, people who have been wounded, and people who have to continue their lives and support our military, our armed forces. And I would like to finish with saying that we are thankful to those Russian citizens who yesterday, in the last 2 days, went to the streets of Moscow and St. Petersburg to protest against Putin's attack on Ukraine. Not as many as we would like to see, but we would like to say from Ukraine that we see you, and we noted that protest, and it gives us hope that this attack will not only be stopped by us and all the civilized world, but there are forces in Russia, there are citizens in Russia who do not want and do not support the brutal attack on its neighbors. Thank you very much, and I would be happy to answer questions.
Excuse me. Hi, I'm Sarah McKelvey with the BBC. President Zelensky said that citizens in Ukraine should use Molotov cocktails to defend their homes, and the Ukrainian defense minister has asked Congress for additional Stingers and anti-aircraft weapons. Can you tell us what progress you're making in convincing Congress to give you the equipment, the military equipment that you're requesting?
Thank you. We have very productive discussions with the United States and with all of our friends and allies. We will be informing, of course, when there are decisions, but I want to say that, that the help that the United States has provided Ukraine, the 650 million worth of defense support in 2021, which is the highest number since 2014, and all the discussions that we have and all the support that we have from the United States right now is at a very high level. So we are working closely with our friends and colleagues here on the additional support.
What was the reaction of President Biden's remarks yesterday, and when did he and President Zelensky last speak? You said that they spoke. Do you know when that last conversation was?
The last conversation was just a couple of 10-15 minutes ago. So if you would take a look, there is a tweet from our president, just a recent tweet about it. And you have to understand, the situation is very tense in Ukraine. And as you probably saw from the President Zelensky is tweeting and also doing the video messages to keep Ukrainians, but also to keep the rest of the world informed about what we are doing. President Zelensky is in Kyiv, together with the head of our government. Just recently, they put out a video in front of the president's office, essentially with a very simple message, saying we're here, we're in Ukraine, we're in Kyiv, we defend our country, and we intend to continue doing so.
And my second question was, what were your reactions to President Biden's remarks yesterday? Do you think that he went far enough with President Putin?
Well, we are grateful for the sanctions. If you look at the sanctions, it covers a very broad range of topics. As a former Minister of Finance, I was very happy to see the sanctions against major Russian banks. I was very happy to see the export controls. I was very happy to see the personal sanctions and all of that. Now, we also heard from President Biden that it's a first wave of the strong sanctions package. So our reaction has been voiced by our president right away. We're very thankful for this very strong sanctions that will be heard and felt in Russia, and we look forward to the next waves.
Ambassador, do you think, on her question, will those sanctions be strong enough? What is your impression as far as will that do what it needs to do to get the Russians to step back?
Look, there is only one person knows what we need to do for him to stop, and it's Mr. Putin. He's the one who started this war in 2014. He's the one who started this war in 2021 with the escalation. He's the one who started really hot, full-fledged war right now. So we can guess what will make him stop. But I think what we should do, and we should be very united in it. And that's why we're very happy that we have 73 countries together with us, so that we together can do and will do everything that it takes for him to stop, disappear from the territory of a sovereign country where he and his armed forces should not be, and stop this war against our country. Now, there will be another event which you probably will be covering today, the meeting of the Security Council of the United Nations, where we will be discussing and hopefully adopting the resolution on this issue. And we also call on all of the friends and allies on the countries not only to co-author the resolution, but also be very strong and decisive, because we need all international platforms and venues at moments like this show that actually we together can react on this, we can react quick, and we can actually decisively take decisions.
Do you have a comment on where a diplomatic avenue might stand? Putin said he might still meet. Is that on the table at all?
As our president said, since he was elected in 2019, bringing peace to Ukraine is, and will always be his number one priority. Number two is we've done everything since 2019 in order, even though, whether we might like them or not, but to comply with the Minsk Accords and ensure that we're moving forward in returning through diplomatic solution the territories of Donetsk and Lugansk. And we also started the Crimean platform to create another diplomatic platform and solution and path to return through diplomatic solution the Crimea, which also is illegally occupied and annexed by Russia. So our devotion and our president's devotion to peace does not need to be proven. During the past 3 years, that was his actions, all his actions were to actually get to lasting peace and through diplomatic solution to restore the territorial integrity of our country. Even days before Putin attacked us, our president was very public and always said that he's ready to meet with Mr. Putin and discuss these issues in a peaceful and diplomatic manner. Yesterday, again, in his public statement, our president said that we will defend our country. This is the priority number one right now. But of course, we are ready for the peace talks. Now, he also made very clear, we are ready for peace talks, but we are not ready to capitulate or surrender.
Ambassador, it seems that the US are going to personally sanction President Putin this afternoon. How do you feel about that?
Well, I cannot comment on something that didn't happen, but I can say that what seems already a decision that was made public, that the European Union implemented the sanctions, it seems the very right move, because it was President Putin's decision to attack Ukraine. It was his public decision, and he is the one who's responsible for the war that Russian Federation is now waging on Ukraine.
Madam Ambassador, among the tools you're using to defend your country are U.S.-supplied Javelin missiles and then Baltic-supplied Stinger anti-aircraft missiles. How extensively have those weapons been used by your forces, and how successful have they been? Do you have a rough order of how many tanks or helicopters were destroyed by U.S.-supplied and Baltic-supplied weapons?
Let me answer in this way, without disclosing what I shouldn't be disclosing, but I want to tell you that we are using them actively and very effectively.
Are you asking for more formally?
Yes.
And when might that request come down? In the next day or two?
That I cannot tell you, but we're working very closely, not only with the United States, but with other friends and allies. And you probably already saw the statement by Mr. Stoltenberg after the NATO meeting that not only the US but other allies will be providing us with additional defense equipment. Thank you.
Madam Ambassador, just to follow up on that, what would you like to see NATO do? Would you like to see an expedited admission of Ukraine into NATO? Would you like to see NATO more aggressively deploy troops?
I think you know the answer, but let me answer it this way. In 2018, we changed our constitution, and we included our desire to join European Union and NATO in our constitution. Our parliament did so because the majority of Ukrainians, 62%, actually support Ukraine joining the NATO. Now, NATO is an alliance, and we need the decision of all 30 members to accept us. And we have been on a very strong path towards working with our friends and allies in NATO on our plan to, in the future, become member of NATO. In 2020, Ukraine became the EOP partner with NATO, and that allowed us already to cooperate in so many areas, from training to getting our army more NATO compliant, to transforming the country. Because again, contrary to what Russians think, NATO is not a military alliance. NATO has so many other cooperation paths, especially focused on the rule of law and democracy and everything that we will be able to discuss with all of you when the war is over and when my country is free from the attack. But right now, of course, priority number one is to defend the country. So we are talking to all of the friends of allies, and allies whether they are members of NATO or not members of NATO, to provide us with all the security and defense capabilities right now. And, as a citizen of Ukraine, of course, I hope that we soon will win, that the peace will return to the country, and then we will return to the discussions of so many strategic issues and items on the agenda, including the NATO membership.
Ambassador, do you have an update on civilian casualties? And a second question, I've seen some Ukrainian activists call for a no-fly zone to be imposed over Ukraine. Is that something that your government is planning to ask for or that you would support?
Thank you. On the casualties, I do not have the numbers for you right now. You have to understand that we are collecting the information from everywhere, and I just want to only use the numbers. So as soon as closer to the end of the day in Ukraine, we will have the numbers, and we would be happy to share it with you. But it has been very hard this day, especially when Russians deliberately targeted some of the civilian infrastructures and hospitals and emergency rooms and others. It has been very hard. The
no-fly zone.
No-fly zone. Well, there are so many things we are talking about with all of our friends and allies. And of course, as a country that is attacked, is fighting for our existence right now against a much stronger enemy, we are discussing and we are asking our friends and allies for any type of support or any type of sanctions or restrictions that they might provide. Now, I will not be discussing the specific of them, because I think it's also very important for us to stay united, to discuss them and implement them when we all agree on what is it that we together, as the anti-war and anti-Putin coalition, are ready to do.
Madam Ambassador, can you give an update on the security situation in and around Kyiv? How are you holding out? How long do you expect you can hold out for?
Well, Kyiv has been Ukrainian for the past couple of thousand years, and we intend to keep it for the next couple of thousand years. But the situation in Kyiv, of course, is very difficult right now. There has been air assault on Kyiv. There is destruction of the civilian infrastructure. There were groups that tried to get into Kyiv, and some of them got into some parts of Kyiv. So there was a combat in some parts of Kyiv. But Kyiv is fully under control of Ukrainian armed forces, the National Guard, territorial defense, and even though the situation is remain tense, because as we all heard from Mr. Putin's speech, that is his goal. His goal is to attack all Ukraine. His goal is to capture Kyiv, and his goal is to have a pro-Russian government in Kyiv. Now, all three of those, we Ukrainians not only believe is not possible, but together with our armed forces, we are doing everything possible to prevent that from happening.
Ambassador, last night the President said to EU leaders that this may be the last time that they see him alive. With that in mind, is President Zelensky still in Kyiv? Does he plan to stay there? Is there a discussion of him sort of retrenching to the west or going somewhere else?
President Zelensky is in Kyiv. He regularly records the messages from Kyiv, and he intends to stay there. And our armed forces also intend, as well as all people who live in Kyiv, to fiercely defend our capital.
Madam Ambassador, you talked about the possibility of a meeting with Russian President Putin. To what extent, does your government believe that that's a legitimate offer to speak, to negotiate? I know you said not to capitulate, but the idea of Minsk as a venue in particular, does that strike the Ukrainian government as a legitimate option?
Well, the only thing I can say now is what our president said, that at any stage we are ready to, of course, for peace talks, but we are not ready to capitulate or we are not ready to surrender. When we have or if we have more information about that, because we only heard what we heard, like you, in the press.
But there have not been any direct communications about potentially setting anything up, even through or even during...
Nothing I can share with you now. More questions?
Can you authenticate that the now famous audio clip from Serpent Island is authentic? The F Russia, is that an authentic tape or is that disinformation?
It was shared by our commander-in-chief, and we're proud that those 13 military men responded like they should have responded to a proposal to surrender.
Okay, so you're authenticating that as an accurate tape, audio clip. It's not made up or after the fact.
Well, you know, being in Washington, D.C., I cannot check personally, so to authenticate. But yes, it's it was shared by the official sources of Ukraine.
Just to follow up on the disinformation, we've heard
Yes.
warnings that Russia would attempt to demoralize Ukrainian forces with false reports of surrenders. Are you seeing any evidence that is occurring?
We see the attempts, but we know that so far, during the 48 hours, only people who surrendered, and we have it on the video, and we have actually them in captivity, are the Russian forces. So we also would like here to ask all of you to take information from the official sources from Ukraine. Our commander-in-chief, our territorial defense, our armed forces, they all are very active and putting all the information in Ukrainian, English, and other languages, and we also duplicated on the embassy resources on a regular basis. So please take it from there, and our security service is also monitoring closely all the disinformation attacks, because again, this attack, even though now we all focused, of course, on the direct military attack, but the hybrid attack didn't disappear from there. So they're trying to spread the disinformation, they're trying to spread fakes, that's why in Ukraine, and I also want to tell you that all Ukrainian channels now work as one. They united not only our political parties, all united, not only our parliamentary groups united and worked together in light of this attack, but also all the TV stations in Ukraine now work together and provide our citizens with the up-to-date, correct information on a regular basis, plus informing citizens what they should do, where they should go, what are the numbers to contact, also on a regular basis. So, we know that there is a lot of many disinformation efforts, but we seem to battle them quite successfully for the moment.
Madam Ambassador, on Chernobyl, have you received any guidance from the United States or NATO, considering there was fighting going on there and how delicate that region is? Has anyone reached out to give you some next steps and share intelligence, that sort of thing, about that specific area?
Well, we are reaching out to everyone, and we are informing everyone and all the regulatory bodies that have to do with especially the nuclear stations. Again, nuclear industry is quite large in Ukraine. A large portion of our electricity generation is nuclear. We have quite a number of power plants. That's why we put special emphasis on guarding them against the enemy, so that we responsibly can run them even during the time of these attacks. So with the Chernobyl plant, our National Guard fiercely defended it until it was taken over. But again, in defending these plants, we are trying to be very responsible and careful so that there is no damage to it. We cannot say the same about Russian Federation, so that's why we are warning, and that's why we are reaching out to everyone. So this is the issue that has to be discussed, that Russia has to be specifically pressed on this particular topic.
And have you gotten a response from anyone?
Пані посол, скажіть, будь ласка, багато українців зараз, Сполучені Штати сказали, нададуть притулок, якщо це потрібно українцям. Але багато хто хоче повернутися додому, але не може. Зараз повітряний простір закритий, можливо, закінчуються візи. Як діяти в таких ситуаціях українцям, які застрягли, заблоковані зараз?
Would you like me to answer in English or in Ukrainian? If in Ukrainian, I can stay and answer later on. But the question was that many Ukrainians are leaving the country now, looking for essentially saving their children from the attacks, and some Ukrainians want to come back, but because there is no air flights to Kyiv, it's also difficult. So, and the question was what we can recommend as the embassy. So first, I would like to ask all Ukrainian citizens here in the United States, be in contact with the embassy, our consulate here in Washington, D.C., but also in Chicago, in San Francisco, in Houston, and in New York, are working 24/7. We also at the 24/7 regime like all Ukraine right now. So any questions that Ukrainian citizens have here, please contact us. We would be happy to assist. Second, yes, there are many Ukrainians who are actually coming back home now to fight for their country. And even though there are no flights, they are all flying to the closest European places, and there is no problem with crossing the border. So we know many Ukrainians who, as we speak, are flying back home and will be in Ukraine through any checkpoints on the western border. And on people who are taking the kids out, and we're very grateful to the neighboring countries for the help that they're providing these people while they temporarily leave the country. Now it's understood that if it's old people or women or small kids, we value every life of Ukrainian, and we would like to protect every life of Ukrainian. So we are making everything possible. Plus, the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine today had a special meeting, and they actually, made it easier to deal with quite a number of procedures and processes that are required to get the humanitarian assistance into the country, so that we can be more effective in supplying our people. And we are working with the United States, by the way, actively through USAID, and I had a very productive call yesterday with Ambassador Power, who's coordinating the assistance that the U.S. can provide us on this very important topic.
Ambassador, on that note, can you give us an update about the humanitarian situation? How many people have already been displaced? What specific requests are you asking for from the U.S.?
I cannot tell you the numbers again, and I don't want to speculate here. But on the humanitarian assistance, again, we have the couple of ministers, the Minister of Social Policy, the Vice Prime Minister on reintegrated territories, and the Vice Prime Minister on European integration. They together, under the orders from the President and Prime Minister, are working now on actually putting quickly together the needs, getting the supplies that are necessary, and of course we have to, we are working how to spread it within the country quickly.
Madam Ambassador, you said that President Zelensky is in the country and with no plans to surrender. Is he willing to fight to the death? Like, what is the exit strategy or point, what's the point of surrender?
The strategy that President and all Ukrainians have is to fight until our victory. And we would like, together with our friends, allies, and partners, and definitely together with all of our armed forces, to get there faster, so we are not losing the bravest and the best that we have in our armed forces.
Ma'am Ambassador, how many of your military have been killed to date? You said 2,800 Russians won't be going home. How many of your soldiers have died?
We will have the number later on, so I only have the yesterday's number, and I don't want to share the old information.
Fair enough.
Madam Ambassador, on the call to have with President Biden today, do you have any other insight you can share on how to, I know we saw the tweet from President Zelensky, and then also, are you getting the intelligence, are the allies sharing enough intelligence with Ukraine and getting everything they need in that way?
Well, the call has been very productive. You saw the tweet. The president said, the president expressed gratitude to the U.S. for the support, and we discussed the 3 items which are the important items on the agenda: the defense, supplies, the sanctions, and other items on the bilateral agenda. How can we move this anti-war, anti-Putin coalition forward? So it has been a very good call. And again, under the circumstances, also you have to understand that it's not easy to conduct phone calls and meetings when your city is being bombed by the rockets and missiles by the enemy. But it was a very good call, and we are very closely cooperating on the situation, sharing the information and discussing the needs that Ukraine has now in order to continue. Thank you. Thank you very much again. Thank you for coming. We will be sending, if you would like us to send you more information, please leave your emails with our press secretary, so that when we have updates, you don't have to come here, but we can actually email you quickly. And then hopefully we'll see each other either tomorrow or soon. Thank you.